California, the economic powerhouse of the United States, is once again making headlines. But this time, it's not for Silicon Valley breakthroughs, Hollywood blockbusters, or its place at the forefront of technological innovation. Instead, the focus is on a political movement that has been quietly gaining traction for years, and now it's closer than ever to becoming a reality. The question is no longer whether California wants independence, but how soon it could happen. With a population larger than most countries and an economy that surpasses entire nations, California is taking steps that could forever redefine the political landscape of the United States. Could the Golden State actually leave the Union? And if so, what would that mean for the rest of the country and the world? This bold movement is called Calexit. Advocates believe it's not just a fantasy, but a necessity. But why now? What is driving this shift, and what could be the real-world implications of California becoming its own nation? Stay with us as we explore the full story behind California's potential path to independence and what it could mean for the U.S. and the world. The Calexit movement, a push for California's secession from the United States, has grown substantially over recent years. What started as a fringe idea has now gained significant political traction, as frustration with national policies and leadership intensifies. Advocates argue that California's needs, priorities, and political direction are increasingly at odds with those of the federal government. This discontent has been brewing for years, but recent political developments have only fueled the fire. In fact, advocates for Calexit have gathered enough signatures to push for a referendum that could appear on the 2028 election ballot. If successful, this initiative would ask California voters a historic question. Should California secede from the United States and become an independent nation? This question would mark a turning point in American history. But is the movement's success really possible? And what's behind the growing support for California's independence? The push for California's independence is not a new idea. The roots of the Calexit movement stretch back decades, but it gained significant mainstream attention during the 2016 presidential election, when the state overwhelmingly rejected the new national leadership that took office. This marked the beginning of a widening divide between California and the federal government. In the years that followed, the state's frustration grew as political rifts deepened over various issues. By 2024, the political climate had become so divisive that it felt almost impossible for California to continue aligning itself with national leadership. As the rift deepened, the push for a different path forward, separate from Washington, D.C., began to take shape. Supporters of Calexit argue that California's growing population, robust economy, and cultural identity justify its independence. They assert that California's leadership in key sectors like technology, agriculture, and entertainment makes it economically self-sufficient. Furthermore, they argue that the state's progressive values, particularly on issues such as immigration, climate change, and civil rights, often clash with the federal government's conservative stance, leaving California marginalized and underrepresented. While the seeds for Calexit were planted years ago, the 2016 presidential election was a key turning point. In that election, a vast majority of Californians rejected the national leadership that emerged, further cementing the feeling of alienation that many in the state felt. This sentiment grew even stronger in 2024, when an increasingly polarized political climate intensified tensions between California and the federal government. From contentious debates over immigration reform to policies on climate change and civil rights, California found itself at odds with national mandates time and time again. These disagreements created a situation where it felt almost inevitable that California would need to seek a path of greater autonomy. One of the most significant sources of conflict between California and the federal government has been the issue of immigration. As one of the most immigrant-friendly states in the nation, California has long resisted federal policies that impose stricter immigration controls and limit protections for undocumented individuals. The state is home to millions of immigrants, and cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego have served as sanctuaries for those seeking refuge. The state has refused to comply with federal mandates aimed at cracking down on immigration, even facing threats of funding cuts and legal actions from the federal government. For many Californians, these measures are seen as harmful and unjust, further fueling resentment toward national leadership. The Sanctuary City movement, which opposes federal immigration enforcement, has become a powerful symbol of California's defiance. Supporters of Calexit argue that the state's sovereignty over such matters is fundamental to its identity, and that its values do not align with the federal government's stance. Another major point of contention between California and the federal government is climate policy. While the federal government has rolled back environmental regulations and placed a greater emphasis on traditional energy sources, California has taken the opposite approach. The state has been a leader in clean energy, setting ambitious targets for reducing carbon emissions and investing in renewable resources. California's commitment to green energy has put it at odds with national policies that promote fossil fuel production. For example, under the leadership of Governor Jerry Brown and Governor Gavin Newsom, the state passed sweeping climate change laws that positioned it as a global leader in environmental reform. The devastating wildfires that have plagued the state in recent years have only underscored the urgency of climate action, creating a sharp contrast between California's policies and the federal government's lack of emphasis on climate issues. This growing divide between state and federal priorities has led many to believe that California's future lies in greater independence from Washington. One of the most frequently asked questions surrounding Calexit is whether California could survive as an independent nation. The state has long prided itself on its strong economy and its ability to innovate across various industries. But could it function without the support of the federal government? The answer, according to many supporters, is yes. With a GDP of nearly $4 trillion, California boasts one of the largest economies in the world. Were it a separate nation, it would rank among the top 5 largest economies globally. Much of California's economic strength is driven by Silicon Valley, home to tech giants like Apple, Google, and Tesla, as well as the state's major contributions to agriculture and entertainment. But critics of Calexit argue that secession would come with significant challenges. While California's economy is indeed large, it still relies on federal funding for infrastructure, social programs, and emergency relief. Secession would require the state to create its own defense system, establish new trade agreements, and negotiate diplomatic relations, all of which would come with a substantial cost. Even if California were to vote in favor of independence, the legal road to secession would be far from smooth. The U.S. Constitution does not provide a clear path for states to leave the Union. This is a stark contrast to other countries, where regions can hold referendums and negotiate independence. Any attempt at secession would likely face legal challenges from Congress, the Supreme Court, and other parts of the federal government. Some analysts argue that national leadership would take aggressive measures to prevent California from leaving, considering the state's economic and strategic importance to the country. Internally, there are also divisions within California itself. While major urban areas along the coast tend to support progressive policies, more conservative voices from rural regions in Northern California may resist secession. This internal divide could further complicate the state's quest for a unified movement. If California were to successfully secede, its independence would have ripple effects across the globe. As one of the world's largest economies, California plays a crucial role in global trade, technology, and finance. An independent California could establish new international partnerships, potentially reshaping the global economic landscape. The success of Calexit could also set a precedent for other states to pursue independence. States like Texas, which has previously expressed interest in secession, could view California's example as a roadmap for their own future. On the global stage, California's independence would affect diplomatic relations, defense alliances, and economic agreements. Countries with strong economic ties to California, such as China, Japan, and the European Union, would likely seek to establish direct agreements with the newly independent nation. Whether or not California ultimately succeeds in achieving independence, the growing support for Calexit reflects deep dissatisfaction with the current political system. This movement is more than just a reaction to national leadership. It is a statement about the future direction of the United States. California has long been a leader in innovation, economy, and social progress. As the state continues to push for greater autonomy, the implications for both the nation and the world cannot be ignored. Whether or not Calexit succeeds, it has already sparked a conversation that will shape the future of American politics for years to come. What do you think? Should California become its own nation? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to stay updated on this historic moment, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest updates. See you in the next video.